Hey class, welcome back to EDUC 3233. I think that's the first time I've nailed that the first time all semester long recording these lecture videos. So this is a bittersweet lecture video for me just because this is the last one of our course, the last one I'm recording and sharing with you all. So just been a pleasure working with you all this semester, and I hope you've watched. If you've watched these, I hope you've gotten something out of them. But now we're going to move over. We talked about declarative knowledge, we've talked about procedural knowledge and how those, we're talking about them separately, but there's a lot of overlap between them. Now we're looking at teaching procedural knowledge and some actual educational applications. We're going to look at a couple of methods by which you might want to use as a teacher, or, even if you're not a teacher, I mean, these might be just approaches you might consider, working into parenting, or if you're someone who trains people for a job or anything at all, like where you're maybe teaching someone how to do something. I'm not saying you have to follow these step by step because some of it is more applicable to school, but there might be some ideas that could be kind of replicated in other settings. So I hope that everyone watching this can find something to connect to. So we're talking about kind of the implications for education in terms of teaching procedures, because if you're a teacher, for example, you're teaching lots of procedures, especially like when those kids are really young, elementary kids, almost a lot of your day is spent teaching procedures, lining up correctly, sitting at your desk, raising your hand, things like that. You're probably teaching procedures just as much as you're teaching content for the young kids. If you're a parent and you're teaching your kid how to put their shoes on, how to use the bathroom, I mean, how to make cereal for themselves, all kinds of ways in which, we're sharing with people how to do things. So some things to consider is, how important it is for that declarative knowledge. If we go back to the ACT-STAR theory that we looked at last lecture, declarative knowledge is the base that we need to learn any sort of procedure. I mean, like, same thing I keep mentioning is driving a car. If you don't have the declarative knowledge of all the different parts and pieces and inner workings of a car, it's going to make it very challenging to drive said car. The other thing is practice, practice, practice in order to move through those three different stages of the ACT-STAR theory, getting to that autonomous stage where you can kind of just do something without thinking about it, where it becomes more muscle memory, requires lots of practice. And then also getting feedback. If you're teaching skills to somebody or you're teaching procedures to somebody, you want to provide them with feedback, ways to improve if they're not performing the procedure, ways that they're doing well. We know from self-efficacy theory that getting that positive feedback can also be beneficial. So here's just a couple of examples, two teaching strategies that you might adopt. And this doesn't mean you have to use one or the other. You might teach one procedure one way and another the other, just kind of what works for you. We have the expository method where teachers will start by activating existing knowledge. Maybe you have a prompt or a question to get students thinking, kind of find out what they already know, prime the pump, so to speak, present the steps and the procedures. You might model them yourself and then provide practice with a lot of feedback. And here's an example. If you are teaching students in sixth grade language arts class, ask students if they remember writing a paragraph in fifth grade. So you're trying to build on that knowledge that they already have. You might brainstorm with them some examples or characteristics of a good paragraph or a strong paragraph, and you're going to expand on their existing information. You really want to prime the pump for what they already know and build from there. And then you might list the steps to what it takes to make a 5-paragraph essay, clearly present those steps, and then give lots of chances to practice and give feedback by assigning a 5-paragraph essay for homework, and then you can discuss the next class. There's also the discovery method where we present the learning objective, and some students may have prior knowledge to it, some may not. You also might present examples, possible examples, or non-examples. Sometimes that works too. And then you sort of students form and test sort of hypotheses. This is where you might see these kind of procedural trainings more sort of in like a scientific STEM related class, and then obviously provide feedback. We can see the similarities across both. Feedback is really important and practice is really important. That is regardless of what kind of approach or method you want to use, you obviously want to allot a lot of time for feedback and for practice and feedback. So I thought I was going to give an example of the discovery method. I guess not. Sorry, folks. But yeah, this would be more like, think about like if you were teaching kids how to work in a laboratory for the first time, like in a lab setting, like maybe you're teaching a biology lab or a chemistry lab, you might present the objective of students will, be able to fill out their notebook, their lab journal. You might present examples of lab journals that are already filled out. You might give students an opportunity for questions and hypotheses about the things that they're doing in the lab. And then obviously as their teacher, you're going to give lots of feedback. So again, I think these are methods that, they're both very useful methods, and you don't have to pick one or the other as a teacher. You can kind of use both depending on the assignment, depending on the students, depending on the subject, all kinds of things. So just keep that in mind, just some examples. And that's going to be it. That's our last lecture, folks. We're done. See you next time. Be good. Be safe.